Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome you all for today's Indian Forensic Psychiatry session. Today we have with us Dr. Rajendra KM, who is Assistant Professor of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry at NIMHANS. I think he is the best person to talk about this topic today because he is coordinator of something called as Swatantra Clinic, which they run. Dr. Rajendra would explain you about what this is. And thank you, Dr. Rajendra, for doing this session.
Thank you, Chetan, for the introduction. So, as Chetan introduced, that we are talking about a legal aspect in psychiatry, or more specifically in child psychiatry. So, as we are medical professionals, we come across the legal related issues, legal related concerns, and we need to be there as an expert at some times and also assist them in the due process. So, as we are more of medical persons, but in our profession, forensic is also a part, and we can't shy away from it. And many times, when we are not aware or when we are not exposed, as we will be a little bit anxious or worried about the aspects that will be there with every one of us. But if once we are aware and we are exposed to a situation, then we will feel more comfortable. So today I will try to cover Juvenile Justice Act on two aspects. One is academic aspect and one is in the clinical aspect. So the presentation will little bit more focus on the preliminary assessment part. I will allude to what is preliminary assessment in the coming slides. So today we are trying to understand Juvenile Justice Act from an academic perspective and also from a clinical perspective. So coming to a brief background, as you all know, there was a case which became a big movement in the society, and this act got reframed or reformed in many ways after that movement. But it also has a background like that Hague Adoption Convention says that what are the standards for adoption and how we should carry out. So there are need of changes, and they were made. So as I said, this Juvenile Justice Act has three components in it. One is child who need care and protection. Second, the child who are in conflict with law. Third, it also deals with adoption related processes. So coming to the act per se, like it has been amended from the president, the recent amendment in 2016. We are 4 years from there. And as the act has been come in the place, the procedures and the standards which are recommended by the acts are slowly getting in their places. It is not that everything has been happening in the according to the things said and done in the acts, but there are gradual changes in the implementation, and with due course of time that implementation is getting better. So as I said, this act deals with the children in conflict with law, children in need and care and protection, and also adoption. So when it comes to the chapters, it has 10 chapters. One is the introduction, second is related to the care and protection, third is related to Juvenile Justice Board, how and the procedures in which when the child is in conflict with law, what procedure should be followed by each stakeholder, like a police officer, child welfare person, Juvenile Justice Board. Next is what does Child Welfare Committee means. the procedure in relation to the need and care of protection. Next is rehabilitation and social integration and adoption and other offences regarding against children. So as you see, if you look at the overall, the first two chapters are based on the principles and introduction, definitions and principles. Next two chapters are on children in conflict with law. Next two chapters are children in need and prayer of protection and how this children should be rehabilitated who are in the child welfare committee, under child welfare committee who need child care and protection or who are in conflict with law, how we should rehabilitate them and also enhance their social integration. Then the last chapter deals with adoption and offences against other children. So there are 10 chapters. So coming to the understanding of the structure, how does the child related personnel, the personnel who take decision regarding child welfare, child protection, so how does the structure functions in a state? So as you see, the state will be a controlling body or monitoring body. So the whole JJ Act, POXO Act, all come under Women and Child Development Department. So the director of Women and Child Development Department will be the primary person. Above that will be principal secretary, above that will be ministry. So below that will be a project director. Then there is a one separate group where there is considered only about adoption, where there is adoption manager, adoption officer, and also they will monitor the adoption process before, during, and after the adoption. Next is child protection. Like in this child protection, there are two things. One, who need care and protection, and who are in conflict with law. So there is a program manager who will manage both the acts at under the director level. So as I said, there is one separate team for adoption, one team which take care of children in conflict with law and also children who needs care and protection. But it is in the state level, it is in the administrative office, how does the organization it will be managed. Coming to the each district level, the whole head to monitor the implementation, the following of the act, the institutes, everything comes under district magistrate, and below that person will be the district child protection officer. Below that district child protection officer, she will have or he will have additional persons for helping him and assisting him to implement the administration in the district level. One is protection officer for institutional care, means when there any children who is in institute, what should be done, what things should be carried out, those things will be looked after from that person. Then protection officer non-institutional care, those comes to adoption, those comes to the bringing the child from the society to the child welfare committee, ensuring anything happens in the school or in the railway station, anything happens outside the institutes which is pertaining to the protection, that will come with another officer. Then one more is that who takes legal and probation related work for any cases who comes to the child welfare committee, like it may be institutional care or non-institutional care. The overall work what they should do regarding the family background assessment, those things will be done by the legal cum probation officer. So you understood that there is a state organization, then in the district level how the things are organized. Some coming to two aspects. As I said, there is child who needs care and protection and child who are in conflict with law. The child who need care and protection will be dealt by what it is called as committee members, that is child welfare committee. It comprises of it comprises of the 5 members with 1 chairperson and 4 members. They all will be appointed on a temporary rotational basis for every 3 years from Women and Child Department. They all need to report to the district magistrate about the proceedings, about what they are doing every 3 months once. All 5 members in this board, when they are sitting as a board, they will have a capacity of a metropolitan or judicial magistrate of a first class. So at least when the case they are disposing, there should be 3 persons on the board to make any decision. So they take decisions regarding care, protection, treatment, development and rehabilitation. So these are the domains in which they make decisions. Coming to the another board which is called as Juvenile Justice Board. This board is for children who are in conflict with law. So this will be comprising of 3 members. One will be a principal magistrate with 3 years of experience with the background of having a knowledge in child development and child psychology, along with 2 social workers, one being woman. The bench has a power of a metropolitan magistrate or judicial magistrate of first class. So the main role of this board, other than what happens in the court, is to ensure the informed participation of child and parents in every step of process, from the process of being apprehended, from the process of being trialed, to the process of rehabilitation. So the board formation, the main agenda is to ensure that the child rights are being protected through the process of apprehending the child during the inquiry and also during the care and rehabilitation. So this is of 3 members, and the 2 members should have a consensus regarding the decisions. When they can't reach a consensus, the metropolitan magistrate decisions will stand. So they have a power to order the police to order for registering a FIR when they get to know that there are punishments or offences committed against the child. So they can order this. So they can also order for an FIR. The CWC can order an FIR if they found to know that this child has been involved in other offences by an adult. Like other offences means like an adult or a adult group involving the child in theft or in petty crimes or in peddling drugs. So those are all offences against child who is in conflict with law or who are in care and protection. For those 2 situations, CWC and JJB have power to ask police to register FIR against those who have misutilized the children. Coming to the power of Juvenile Justice Board, they should ensure the participation of child and the parent. They should ensure the child rights. When the child doesn't have a legal aid which is available for him for fighting his case or for defending him, the legal services should be provided by the board through legal authority of states. During the apprehension of the child, what are the rules, how the child should be apprehended, what are the norms should be followed by police officer, where they should be kept, how the inquiry should be carried out. All things are written down in the act, and that should be monitored by the JJ board. For example, when the child gets apprehended, basically the SJPU, Sessile Juvenile Police Unit, will have a child welfare police officer who is assistant sub-inspector. He will carry out all the procedure related to the child who is in conflict with law. He should be not handcuffed, not put in lockup. He should be placed in observation home immediately after apprehension. Within 24 hours, he should be produced in front of JJ board. So any person who has a charge should be also, should have placed the child in the observation home itself. They can't be handcuffed, they can't be locked up, they can't be placed anywhere else other than these places. So these are the rules which has been laid down and will be monitored by the JJ board regarding the apprehension. Regarding the inquiry, any case, the inquiry should get over from day of registration of FIR within 4 months from the date of production. And if there is a delay, the JJ board can ask for the reasons for delay. Especially I want to press this point as we are all mental health professionals. There is something called as preliminary assessment which comes under section 15 and section 14. So a preliminary assessment in case of heinous offences under the section 15 shall be disposed by JJB within a period of 3 months for first production. Means they should be able to get a preliminary assessment within 3 months and also should have a decision regarding it. So if the inquiry of petty offences remains inconclusive even after this period, such proceeding shall be terminated. So when it comes to inquiry, they have timelines for each inquiry. They have a section called as preliminary assessment in place. This preliminary assessment is carried out for those children who have committed heinous crime. So the heinous crime, heinous offense. So there are 3 types of offenses: petty, serious, heinous. The petty offense is where the punishment is less than 2 years for any alleged crime. Serious, 2 years to 7 years for any alleged crime, the punishment duration. Heinous is above 7 years. 7 years or above. So when a 16-year-old child, when a child who is above 16 and below 18 get involved in heinous crime, they need to undergo an assessment called as preliminary assessment, which assesses the capacity of the child, understanding the consequence and the circumstances in which crime has occurred, to decide to trial the child in the court as a child or to transfer the child into the adult court, adult children court. So this preliminary assessment becomes more important in mental health professional bodies. I will allude to you like how and what ways we can carry out if we are asked. So I told you regarding apprehension, then what are the timelines in which they should carry the inquiry. Coming to the bail, the child can be granted bail under different sections where the release of the CCL will be happen under the supervision of a probation officer, and the release will happen under a fit person. So if the child is getting troubled or child is in danger, then the bail can be avoided, and the CCL, the children who have come in conflict with law will not be released by police, but it is by the Juvenile Justice Board who decides. The bail is decided by the board, and if it happens, it should be applied through a fit person, and the fit person will take the responsibility of ensuring the child's care and development, and the child will not be released if there is threats for child's safety and development once if he gets released to the community. So as I said, like what is preliminary assessment, that we need to do little bit more in detail. So as I said, if a child commits a crime and that crime is punishable as per law for 7 years or more, then he should undergo an assessment called as preliminary assessment under the section 15. Based on this assessment, the board, the 2 social work members and the metropolitan magistrate will decide to hear the case in the Juvenile Justice Board itself or to transfer the case to a regular court, which is a adults court, means children's court in the district level. So what does this preliminary assessment ask for? So this preliminary assessment can be done by the board itself, but if needed, they can ask for an assistant from the qualified mental health professional. So this is what the Act says. So what are the procedures in which we should carry out the preliminary assessment? So whenever if a court or a JJB asks, JJ board asks or sends a child to a clinic for preliminary assessment, what we should understand is, while we are making a preliminary assessment, the assumption we should have is that is innocent unless otherwise it is proved. This is the principle in which we should start our assessment. So the board, after the assessment under the section, passes an order for need of trial that said child as an adult. It shall assign reasons for the same, and the copy of the order shall be provided to the child forthwith. If the court, after getting the preliminary assessment, decides that he was aware of consequences, he were aware of the circumstances were not so difficult that he would have involved in the crime, he was knowing it, he was capable. So in that context, the child will be referred to the adult district courts. So what all JJB can decide? The board, which is constituted of magistrate and the 2 social workers, what are the orders they may pass? So they can't pass death sentence and also imprisonment for life. So there shall be no joint proceeding between the conflict of life with a person who is not a child. For example, a case has been alleged where the adult and child is involved. The child and adult will not be tried at the same time. If the child brought to be in the care of protection, if the child needs, they feel that even though he has been alleged to involved in the crime and he needs protection, the JJB needs to refer them to the Child Welfare Committee. The safety comes first. So to ensure the safety, the board doesn't have capacity to give an imprisonment of life or to give a death sentence. Court has a capacity to place the child under care and protection using by directing him to the CWC. Court will not try them along with adults. So what else the JJ board can do is that it can order that the child need not to be the child's, whatever the orders the child can pass is that the child can be sent to a child care institution, child can be asked to take corrective measures, child can be there asked to carry out the good conduct, child can be placed in a different child care institution as per the need until the age of 21 years. So main points of importance in JJ board is what they want to ensure is all the proceedings are done in respect of child in conflict with law as per the court shall be continued and court as per the enactments of section 55. The power confirmed the board is action as per the section of 8. So coming to the principles in which this act is carried out, means what are the principles? I said there are chapters. So I have given you the introduction. There are 10 chapters, 2 chapters dealing with children in conflict with law, 2 chapters dealing with children in care of child protection, then followed by rehabilitation, followed by adoption and also offences against children. In the second chapter, the act alludes to the principles. Like whenever you want to make a decisions or whenever you want to take any action regarding the act, what are the principles in which our thoughts and decisions should be made. If we can understand these principles and we can base our decisions or conclusions based on these principles, it will be very useful. So coming to the assessment, preliminary assessment, I will allude what we do at NIMHANS when a child is sent to preliminary assessment, which can be practically used in the situations and scenarios. So when the child is referred, first we will confirm that the child is 16 and 18. So we need to look for the evidence for date of birth. Is there any certificate or is there any document which ensures this? If not, we should ask for age assessment, which will be done through a JJ board and the age will be assessed. Second is the committed crime is heinous? So these 2 things we should ensure first. Second, when it comes to the assessment per se, so what does this assessment ask from us is that if the child has a capacity for committing a crime or not, what were the circumstances which has led the child to involve in this such a crime or alleged crime, was we aware of consequences? Was he aware of the consequences, legal, social, family, and moral consequences of such an act? So I ask you to go through this website called as nimansproject.in, in which there are developed materials, as it is pointed out, under the assessment tools under childcare institutions. You can get through the assessment, psychosocial assessment, pro forma, preliminary assessment report, how to write a report, what are the guidance. This has been developed under Dr. Shekhar Seshadri sir under NIMANS, and it is available. So what does this assessment pro forma help us to do? So as there is a snapshot which is displayed here, it collects the basic information, then it collects the family background. Is there any family issues, marital issues, parental deviant behaviors, parental antisocial behaviors, parental substance use, neglect, lack of monitoring, abuse. So those things it will tap in the family. Next, it also collects regarding the school and school information, school behavior. Then it asks about peer affiliation and the deviant peer influence. Then it asks about trauma. It also covers substance use. It also covers the major mental health disorder, anxiety, depression, and ADHD. So this pro forma covers family factors, school related history, peer related history, also asks for deviant peer influence. It also looks through if the child has undergone trauma or child labor experiences which has been child exposed to. Then it collects information regarding child having ADHD, substance use, or any other diagnosable depression or anxiety disorder. So this is the pro forma we carry out for doing the mental health assessment. So when we see a child who has been referred to us from a child welfare board or from a child juvenile justice board, we have two roles to play. One is being a clinician and one is being a forensic specialist. So as I said, the clinician role is to do a mental health assessment, to look for possible below average intelligence, academic difficulties, emotional and behavioral issues, and provide appropriate psychiatric and psychological treatment. And also to do a family evaluation and to give family inputs for making the family to function a little bit better. We can also give inputs based on our assessment of the family, child's abilities, and child's difficulties. We can give also inputs regarding the needed psychosocial assessments and the rehabilitation. So this is our clinician role. So when it comes to a role as a forensic specialist, as I said, I have shown you the pro forma. So this pro forma, like as you said, it asks for three things: the capacity, the circumstances, and the consequences. What NIMANS team has tried to do is to this pro forma, this assessment pro forma and this report tries to give a holistic picture about the child's difficulties, child's background. Means it gives the whole developmental perspective to a person who is reading the report. So as I said, as a forensic specialist, we need to look through the three items what the section 15 asks: the ability, the circumstances, and awareness of consequences. But as a child specialist or a mental health specialist, our ability will be not only to look at that moment, but to get a view regarding the child development, risk factors he has been exposed, how this risk factor has led into this situation where he has been alleged, and what best we can give inputs regarding our understanding. So what we have tried to do in this report is to look through what are the deficits in the ability the child had, like in life skills, in having low average intelligence, having a behavioral disorder which was untreated, having lack of parenting which was needed at that age, having deficits in life skills. So these are the abilities part which covers. Second is the circumstances. We take circumstances from the family, like how and what factors in the family would have led to the circumstance, alleged circumstance, then from the school, then from the child labor. So it gives like how, what all the risk factors have led the child to enter this situation. The third thing is the consequence. Thus the child is aware of what all the negative outcomes while he was committing the act. So it is more that like what consequences he is also thinking now, is he aware, and how he wants to reform. So based on that, we should be able to give our recommendations. We also have in cases of children who are referred from child protection, child in care and protection, we may need to we have more role to play as a clinician than as a forensic psychiatrist. But even then, we may need to take a role of forensic psychiatrist when if the child reports regarding any abuse or any trauma for regarding. So we may need to follow the POXO Act, which we discussed in the last session. The last role which we have is also in role of liaison. For example, as a mental health professional, we sit in clinic. We also interact with children on one-on-one basis. We also interact with referring body. But our role doesn't end there. We also need to take upon a role of being advocate to the child needs and child rights. So there is a lot of role in liaison. For example, getting to know the JJB, DCPO of a district and child welfare committee members, which will make the liaison process easier for the referral of the child, for evaluation, or even for giving treatment or giving reports. Next is establishing the communication channel and a format. Third is getting the background information. For example, any child has been referred, they would have done a certain assessment, what we call it as social investigation report, that is done for children in conflict with law and also children in need and care of protection. So for both, they will do social investigation report. That report will contain family, the number of members in the family, what does neighborhood feel about the child and his behavior and conduct, what does the school feels, what is the situation in which he enters the circumstances. This will give much information in first hand what they already have. Second is what we have understood. We should be able to communicate back to them regarding our understanding regarding the child's intelligence, child's developmental issues, emotional and behavioral issues, what are the treatment we are providing, what is the follow-up we are asking for. Then we can also develop liaison services for doing the preliminary assessment, as I alluded to, where children can have a benefit and the board also can have a benefit of having the child, understanding the child not only from the alleged offense perspective, but overall in a development perspective. So what else we can do is we can sense that we need to synthesize the stakeholders. So act as put in place the child's rights and child's dignity as a first priority. But having a knowledge regarding risk factors, how these risk factors lead to psychological issues, how this in turn will lead to children getting into the alleged offenses. So those things will not be completely aware to the other stakeholders who will interact with these children. So our job is to educate whenever we get an avenue regarding the act, regarding the understanding regarding the child's problems, how environment can impact the child's growth. Those aspects we need to impart to the public prosecutors, to the child care institute caretakers like house mother and fathers, then the superintendents, the NGOs who are involved, and the police personnel. So when it comes to act and when we read it, we have different roles to play. One is a clinician role, One is a forensic specialist role. Then the third, we need to play a role as a person who can enhance the liaison between the two systems. And the fourth, we also go a step ahead for advocating for the child rights and also their needs, and also give inputs regarding how they have entered in this situation and how important it is to give a chance for rehabilitation and how they can carry out it. So that we need to able to we should be able to sensitize the different stakeholder who interact with these children as per the act. So at system levels, we need to have better liaison and also sensitize them, especially NGOs, Juvenile Justice Board, Child Welfare Committees, Rehabilitation Centers, De-addiction centers, and childcare institutions. If we have this information with us, helping a child at clinic is one level, but at clinic with medication and therapy, our treatment will not end. That will be a clinical treatment. As we know, it is we all believe in biopsychosocial model. The social aspect of it, like what centers child can be placed, where are the services child can avail, what are the facilities available in the such institutes. Those information also will be help us to give a better plan to the child for a holistic care. So at the community level, we need to inform the school students and teachers about life skills, decision making, and also the legal aspects. Also at the community level, training the police personnel, training the other mental health professionals, capacity building of NGOs and DMHPs, integrating RKSK program with Ayushman Bharat. Like they all deal with adolescents where they can be sensitized regarding life skills, legal issues, consequences, risk factors, and their protection factors. So, and also we should be able to help the stakeholders to identify the high-risk communities where they can help over the NGOs so that they can decrease the deviant influence, substance influence on the adolescents, which can decrease the influence child getting into a deviant behaviors. So what are the challenges and barriers? At the individual level, it is attitude where we have difficulties in taking up a forensic role. Second, we also tend to judge and label easily. Third, as we have less exposure, we tend to have anxiety because of lack of experience. So these are the individual level barriers. If we can change our attitude by having our knowledge being enhanced, change our judgment by our knowledge, by our developmental perspective understanding. Third, exposing ourselves to such a situation where with experience our anxiety will go off, will help us to improve our acumen better. Coming into the system level, so not able to coordinate or having less cooperation with the systems, not clarity about role, like we want to do everything or we want to do nothing. So having not clarity about the roles we involve. Third is activity based learning than knowledge imparting. Whenever we train someone, we need to give them skills also along, not only with knowledge, and we should listen to their needs when we are addressing the stakeholders. Coming to the community level, it's stigma, then indirect means in which we can approach them than a direct means. For example, in a school, if you want to sensitize, if you want to tell that you will talk about law, legal aspect and responsibility, no one will welcome. But if you can tell that you will address them through indirect means, you will talk about substance, you will talk about media use, then you can go upon and touch upon these aspects. So then including this, whatever the advocacy we want to do regarding child care protection and preventing the children from conflict in ongoing programs, focusing on high risk areas, helping the administration to focus on high risk areas. In those areas, empowering the population who are at risk at the level of school or panchayat. So this all will help us. So basically what I try to cover in the today's presentation is that there is an act which has been in place from 2016, which talks about three aspects: child who are in care and protection, child who are in conflict with law, child if is given for means child how and when the child can be given for adoption, and what process should go on, how the process should be carried out. So this act addresses these three. So this act comes under Women and Child Development Department. So there is a state administrative unit and there is a district administrative unit. So the POCSO Act also comes under the same administrative units. So JJ Act gives every steps and details in context of child rights and dignity, that how each process should be carried out, like how a child need to be protected and brought to a place, or how a child need to be brought to a apprehended. Second is how a process should be carried out in Juvenile Justice Board or in CWC Board, which constitute of certain members with certain powers. Third, when they finish the inquiry, what all decision these boards can make regarding the child's welfare and benefit. Fourth, when the child is involved in legal aspect and he has been having committed a allegedly committed a heinous crime, how they can seek help from a mental health professionals for preliminary assessment. So this act also alludes how the child care institution should get registered, how the rehabilitation process should happen, how other offences regarding the child should be dealt with. For example, giving a substance to a child, making the child intoxicated, making the child involving in other crimes. For those also, there have been punishments determined under this act. So when we have this knowledge and we want to implement in act, we have different roles to play. We have clinical role to play because of the difficult circumstances child will come from, and how the circumstances would have led them to have developmental issues, behavioral or emotional issues. Second, how we can communicate whatever we have understood regarding the child in best interest of the child to the concerned board in understandable format. Third, when the specific request have been asked to take a forensic role, how we can go about that role, what has been the materials available in the academic domain to address a forensic specialist role. Then the fourth is like how and what else we can do other than at the clinical level, being a liaison with the systems to improve the services and to improve the services for the children. And fourth, how we can sensitize the needed stakeholders at different level. So this is the overall things what I have tried to cover. So thank you. I thank the Indians organizing team also for giving me the opportunities. With this, I will close my presentation and it will be open for discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Rajendra, for the lucid presentation.
Is the assessment to be carried out in our adult psychiatric services? Do we need to refer the child to a special child and adolescent psychiatric services if we have an institute?
Yeah. So basically what the law says, if you go through the slide which I have seen, which I have shared, I will share with you people. It says that the JJ board itself can do, or any mental health professional can do, psychologist, social worker, or a psychiatrist. And it is even adult psychiatrist who has knowledge, who is doing adult psychiatry. There is no clear contradiction that he should not carry out. But if there is a child specialist, means who is seeing more children, understanding the developmental perspective and dealing with them, him doing the job better will help the child. But there is no mandatory that the child psychiatrist or child specialist only should see as per the law.
Sir, can you give us the site again from where we can get these performers?
Yes. So I will send you the PowerPoint also. You will get the PowerPoint which we have, which I have used for presentation. The website is called as nimanschildproject.in. where there are assessment tools, the guidelines which were prepared from the NIMANS team, and also the Proforma which can be used. So I will share the PowerPoint itself, so which can be easily available, and if you go through, definitely it will be useful. Dr. Sagar has asked me, is there any role of a private mental health practitioner different? The private practitioner may not be asked to do a preliminary assessment, but if he can advocate or even give a guidance, it will be helpful. But when it comes to child in care, need of care and protection, for example, you got to know that there is child abuse going on. It may be severe emotional abuse. It may be child safety is under threat. So it becomes our responsibility as per Act to report to a child welfare agency. So as you all know, 1098, the number 1098, whenever you have in a trouble, when you feel that child has possibly experienced abuse, child has some difficult circumstances which needs to be brought, bringing that to a notice of a child protection officer if you have a contact, or child welfare committee, at least to 1098 will make our roles, our responsibilities much clearer. So we as a private psychiatrist, when we come across these situations where there is abuse or where there is issues related to safety of the child, physical safety of child, emotional safety of child, or there are threats, then it becomes our role to at least to inform, not inform, mandatorily to inform as per the JJ Act currently to child agency. 1098 is a easier option which we should reach out, and they will take care of further needs regarding that aspect.
I sincerely thank Dr. Rajendra for his presentation and answering the queries. I thank all of you for participating in the discussion. And not the least, I also thank Linux Laboratories Chennai for their educational grant through which we are running this program.